Hi! In this video I want to talk about some intermediate patterns in Sound Voltex that start appearing mostly in levels 14 to 16. What's common about most of these patterns is that they force you to deviate from the default hand positions to play them, which can make the motions unintuitive at first. At least those are the patterns that I struggle with the most when playing. For each pattern, I will also show off a few charts that can be used to train them. All of the charts will be listed in the video description as well. Let's start with a basic but important skill. You need to be able to hit all the single BT buttons and FX buttons with one hand, while the other hand controls the laser. A good chart for practicing this is Neu BSP Style 16, which contains a few such one-handed sections. Just ignore the stupid soft line ending of the chart. Another common and relatively simple pattern is something which I've seen called the Tsumami Trap, which is a very fitting name, I think. The point is that you have a section like this, where the lasers are crossing each other. Except sometimes they do cross and sometimes they don't. And you need to be able to read whether they cross or bounce off each other. A good chart to practice this is PROVOES 16, which has this pattern right at the beginning. The first, more tricky pattern I want to talk about is this Chord Stairs. There are a few variations, but this is the most common version. The main point here is to play the middle chord with one hand, which makes it easier to execute. It is possible to play this pattern with the default hand position, like this. However, you will realize that this feels kinda awkward, especially at higher speeds. There are two other options to play this pattern. You can either play the middle chord with your left hand, or you can play the middle chord with your right hand. And you will probably find that both of these ways feel easier to execute. One chart I recommend for this pattern is Destined Marionette 16. In the beginning, there's a slowed down section where you can practice the pattern very well. Later on in the chart, there's also a faster section. Another good chart is StrayedCatz 15, where the pattern appears in the beginning. If you want to challenge yourself, you can try Stage 16. This chart also has this related chord trill pattern, where you should also play the middle chord with one hand. The next important skill for transitioning to harder charts is cross-handing the knobs. This can be really difficult at first, because perhaps your brain has very strongly linked the blue laser to the left hand and the pink laser to the right hand, and you first need to unlearn that. Also, you need to move your arms around a lot to execute those patterns. But once you manage to, it feels super fun to play. This pattern mostly gets common in level 16 onwards, but there's actually also a level 14 song called悪いところがひとつもない, which contains relatively simple crosshand patterns. For some more difficult, but also more fun patterns, I would recommend Juggler's Maddness and Man's Tsubarona na Kutsu, which are both level 16. The next pattern is about holding down both FX buttons with one hand, while also handling a laser with the other hand. This is also often combined with cross-handing. The optimal way to execute this pattern is to hold the FX buttons with your pinky and your thumb. This will leave your other fingers available to hit the BT buttons. However, in the heat of the moment it can be quite difficult to transition to this position. and I often still find myself doing something like this, which is fine in many cases. Still, I would recommend to practice switching to the thumb and pinky position as much as possible. The first song I would recommend for practice here is西日暮里の踊り 12, because it is not as fast and telegraphs the double FX holds very well. At the end of the chart, there are even easy cross-hand patterns with this hold. Another good practice chart is bateau. You may also find it easier to cross-hand some of those knobs here. And if you think you've become accustomed to those holds, try the beginning of 2 of Us 16. I still find this super hard to read and play. The last pattern is a knob-only pattern, which I call the straight and zigzag pattern. This pattern is common in knob charts and has many variations, but the main idea is that one of the lasers is going straight for a long time, while the other laser is doing a zigzag motion at the same time. This can be super confusing at first, because it requires you to move both knob-turning hands largely independently. As a first introduction to this pattern, I would recommend Believe in Yourself 13, which contains a simpler version of the pattern. One laser is going straight, while the other one just has to do alternating slams. You can also try the level 16 version of the chart for more challenging variations of this. After that, I would recommend Attack on Dwarf 14, which contains the true straight and zigzag patterns, relatively early into the chart. For a bigger challenge, check out Hexennacht 15, which contains many variations of this pattern. Finally, I have a recommendation for a boss song, KIRAMEKI OVERDRIVE 16. This song contains most of the patterns I talked about in this video, such as the Tsumami Trap, one-handing sections, double FX holds, and the straight and zigzag lasers. If you can clear this song, I think it is safe to say that you mastered most of level 16's challenges. That's it for this video. If you have any other patterns that you're struggling with, or any tips to handle those that I showcased, please share them in the comments.